All right, well, I guess we can get started now. It's a few minutes after 6. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for Franklin County Stormwater Collaborative's last webinar of 2025. We're really excited to have Jill Sarazen from Lake Champlain Sea Grant here to present on residential stormwater management. It should be a great presentation. Just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our website on the past events page. I'll put a link to that page in the chat if you'd like to share the recording, which should be up tomorrow, and also check out some of the great resources we have available. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the presentation during a Q&A. And please keep your mic muted throughout the presentation. You may unmute during the Q&A to ask any questions. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Jill for her presentation.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I lost my mute button. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nora, and thanks to NRPC for hosting the webinar and inviting me to speak with you all tonight. And thanks to you all for being here. And it feels like we finally have spring and nice weather to be outside. And hopefully this gets you thinking about some ways to enjoy manage properties and enjoy being outside this spring. So my name is Jill, and I am the Green Infrastructure Collaborative Coordinator with Lake Champlain Sea Grant. And my role is managing the Green Infrastructure Collaborative, which is a partnership between DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and Lake Champlain Sea Grant. And we have the goal of bridging the gap between research, extension, and application of green infrastructure in Vermont in order to achieve outreach and Vermont water quality goals. So I'll be talking a little bit about both of those pieces, the water quality goals and what green infrastructure is tonight. And we're based at the University of Vermont. So first a little bit about Sea Grant. We're part of a network of 34 university-based programs across the country, and it's administered by NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. And we're situated here in Lake Champlain, but other programs are connected to oceans and Great Lakes. And so we're part of that network and work on both sides of Lake Champlain Basin, based here at UVM, the University of Vermont, and SUNY Plattsburgh. And we do research, extension, and outreach work similar to presentations like this, and K through 12 and teacher education programming. And so our goal here is to develop and share science-based knowledge to benefit the environment and economies of the Lake Champlain Basin, which we are all located in right now. So Lake Champlain Sea Grant, we're all about what impacts our water quality, since our water resources and economies are so strongly connected. And some of those issues that we work on include cyanobacteria blooms, which is excessive bacteria growth in warm and calm waters, eroding shorelines, road salt during winter months, and reducing and using best practices for road salt, addressing flooding and planning, and stormwater runoff. So all of these problems here are impacted by stormwater. And where does stormwater come from? So stormwater is defined as rain that falls on impervious surfaces and does not infiltrate into the ground. This image here shows what happens to stormwater after it falls on the landscape here in a forested area, where most of the water is able to infiltrate into the ground. A lot is taken up by plants and evapotranspired or used by the plants. And then some, 10%, it leaves the site as runoff. However, the more we add impervious surfaces and houses and roadways and buildings, the more of that 10% goes up, and our infiltration goes down. And so it gets us to a system that where there's a lot more runoff being produced, and less places for it to go into the ground. And so we need to figure out how to manage this runoff. This happens obviously on a large scale in cities and urban areas where there's lots of impervious surfaces, but rural and suburban areas also have plenty of roads and buildings that lead to stormwater challenges. And as we know, stormwater can cause many harmful impacts. So we're kind of two main buckets of issues here. Water volume, where there's too much water from runoff, and that can lead to flooding in streams, erosion of stream banks and sediment, flashy streams. So water rises really quickly during a storm event. Higher flows and heavy rains, and then causing erosion and flooding, which can damage our habitat, property, and infrastructure. And the other side of runoff or stormwater runoff issues have to do with water quality. So when stormwater runs off a landscape, it takes anything that's on the landscape that can be carried with it. And that eventually goes into downstream water bodies if it's not treated or stopped in another way. And some of these pollutants that can harm our water quality include trash and sediment and oil, nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. And generally, this runoff leads into catch basins. You can see a picture there. And then draining into streams and rivers and ending up in our lakes and ponds, causing issues there as well. So what do we see? One more slide before what can we do about it? But we have, like I said, the issues that show up in our water bodies, having high levels of E. coli, which can impact using the lake and rivers for both animals and people too. So as well as cyanobacteria blooms, decreasing water clarity, so higher turbidity, you can't see through the water, and this impacts fish and the quality of a stream. So cyanobacteria and the situations that causes these blooms is an excess of nutrients. Calm waters and warm waters can lead to these blooms. We know it's a major water quality concern in Lake Champlain and other inland lakes as well. And increasingly more intense rain events due to climate change will lead to more runoff and likely more cyanobacteria blooms as well. So we're trying to address these issues in a number of ways. And one of them is through the use of green stormwater infrastructure. And these are alternatives to typical gray infrastructure, culverts and underground pipes, which collect water and send it away, send it to a downstream water body, buried underground, kind of forget about the water. But our goal in these practices that I'll talk about is to mimic the natural water cycle and treat stormwater close to the source, slowing it down, and then using plants and soil to manage and treat that water. So the goals here are to slow the water down, spread it out, and sink it into the ground rather than sending it away. So the next few slides, I'll share some examples of green infrastructure that can be used to treat spaces throughout specifically residential areas. So we're going to talk, specifically about issues in residential areas. We're looking at on a residential site runoff stormwater coming from rooftops and driveways, steep slopes, areas where water pools and erosion. So this image here shows runoff coming in the different sources of it, coming from a property, and the water all has to go somewhere. So we're going to take a closer look at some of those issues on property level. And this, in a lot of cases, this water will add up, and there's opportunities to slow it down and stop it closer to where it's produced and where it's coming from. So I'm sure plenty of us know about issues, or you've seen situations like the pictures that I'm showing here. An eroded, this is a very eroded property, and those stabilized soils just are getting washed away, carried away during storm events. In the middle picture here, a downspout just draining right onto a sidewalk in that area during storms, and in the winter too, pools, and creates a hazard, and it's unusable. And so what ways can we think about moving that water somewhere else, and hopefully it will create that a more usable space. And then the third picture there, runoff coming off a garage and just landing in an area where there's no vegetation, exposed soil, and that soil was really eroding and causing issues closer to where the house was. So how can we stabilize that area, stabilize the water, send it to a location where it can be properly managed? So we'll talk about some solutions for these kinds of issues. I have the resources that and the suggestions that I'll go through, or a lot of them are based off of these two resources: the Vermont Guide to Stormwater Management, which will walk you through deciding the best practice for the type of runoff that you're dealing with on a property, as well as the Rain Garden Manual, which is a deep dive into rain gardens. And I know a few weeks ago there was another workshop on this topic, so I won't go too in depth on rain gardens, but just to bring it up that a lot of this information that I'll be sharing is also in these guides, and we'll link those at the end. And I have hard copies of both too, so feel free to reach out if you're interested in picking up a physical hard copy of these. So I'm going to walk through a kind of an example property and what to do when there's, or you maybe considering making changes to a property, what kinds of things stormwater wise and water wise might be something to consider during that process. So this we call the site assessment phase. And this involves looking around the property during a storm event. On this picture here is not a storm event, but the best time would be during a storm when it's raining, when you can see where areas where stormwater is generated from, where is that water going, how fast is it going, and where is it going to? Is it leaving the property? What potential issues are caused by the movement of that stormwater and where it's going? Is it eroding an area, causing excess pooling in a certain location? Is there run-on from other areas? So that would be water coming from another property onto the property that you're looking at. And is that causing an issue, which can be sometimes difficult if it's an area that you don't have control over, but at least knowing that where that water is coming from will kind of help you decide certain changes or discussions to have with other landowners nearby potentially. Look at your location and for where downspouts, for gutter downspouts. That's an important one. I wanted to call it out. So where is your water going from downspouts? It's great to have gutters, but looking closely at where that water is draining to think about if it's causing an issue that, or potentially it's draining to the right location. But those are some simple changes that can be made. So all of this can be done just by walking around the property and making some observations, thinking about where water is moving and impacts from storms on site. And is it being sent to a location that is off-site, but then maybe causing issues downstream? So thinking about where the stormwater that's generated in your property, trying to reduce the impact downstream too on other properties. My next slide here has a link here. Maybe Nora, if you'd mind dropping this link in the chat, the Vermont ANR Atlas, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. This is a great resource from the state of Vermont that has data layers, including soil characteristics and wetland boundaries, watersheds. It's kind of an overwhelming amount of information, but if you're interested in taking a look more in depth on your property or around your town or at the state more broadly, this is a great resource, and you'll be able to look at natural resource data like I've listed here, specific to a certain property. So it involves typing in an address and then looking at that map a little bit more, and like similar to how a Google map would work, but there's more layers, information that can be toggled on and off and explored. That can be exciting and pretty useful. So we do recommend taking a look at these resources if you're interested. And one of the most important ones that we consider while with managing stormwater is through looking at the soil type. And so under one of the sections, under the geology section, actually there's a layer on soils. And so I took a little screenshot here of a property that I'll talk about on the next few slides. And this brings up the soil characteristics. So in this example, we have a Grace fine, so it doesn't really matter what the type that first name is, but fine sandy loam is kind of your key indicator that you have a sandy soil, which generally means you're in on this table here. You can kind of search sandy loam or that whole title, type that into Google and find out information specifically about that soil that you have on your property. And if you look it up, you'll find that it is in the hydrologic soil group A, characterized in that, and falls into that group, which means that there's high infiltration rates typically for these soils. This is kind of a broad generalization of a lot of areas. So there are very site-specific details, but it gives you kind of a sense of where to start with and some general characteristics of that whole area. So high infiltration rate, as I said, and hopefully a low runoff potential too. You would see on this site, but very site specific as well too. So looking up soils is one useful tool through the Vermont ANR atlas. So continuing with this property here, I'm going to kind of share some of the site characteristics about this property and then some examples of stormwater focused solutions that can be implemented to solve the challenges that were described by this property owner and I got this information from my colleague who did a site assessment of this property. So the property here, that the same property as the screenshot from the soil layer. So there's pretty sandy soils, and noted here that it's in the hydrologic group A. So high infiltration, low runoff potential. They have well-draining soils, and they are fairly close to the Lake Champlain. It's the nearest water body, and the full property information is there. And so during the site visit, we kind of walk around the property, take a look at all where water would be going during storms, and point out issues, and figure out where the biggest stormwater concerns are and what can be done. Anyone can do this, walking around their property and drawing out kind of where these issues are. And so we hand drew this, and then I just scanned it in so it could be easily shown here. But this is the same property that we took a screenshot of before, and you can find the footprint of the building using Google Maps or A&R Atlas, or just hand drawn. But I think it's really helpful to kind of draw out your site conditions and what you have, some concerns, and it can be, yeah, a fun way to get to know your property better in the site conditions. So this can be hand drawn. I just wrote in a few of the conditions at this site here on my computer, but it could also be hand drawn. And so some of the characteristics that came through from this property, in addition to what I already mentioned, is that they have saturation along the foundation in that saturated area there, saturated area. They have a slope from their driveway and a walkway sloping towards the road. We noted where the vegetation is. There are 3 downspouts. One of them is draining towards the road and leaving the property. The 2 in the back are draining away from the house, but might be contributing to some saturated soils and water entering the basement of this house, kind of along the longer side of the building. What else did they have for issues? There was a retention pond, a stormwater pond in the back of the property that was managed by the homeowners association of the area here, and so we noted that. So that's a site constraint. We can't do too much with the retention pond there, but want to note that it's part of the property, and existing vegetation too. Drew those trees in. Another important piece would be to actually measure the area of the roof and maybe the driveway as well. Might be a step further down the line, but we noted here the area of each section of roof, and this is kind of in the middle of the section, and water would drain off to both sides. So you want to know which direction water is draining, but the area of a roof can be measured, that footprint, on A&R Atlas or on Google Maps, one of the mapping tools. And so that could be helpful, especially if you're designing a rain garden. You'd want to know the size of the rooftop area that would contribute to a rain garden. So site assessment, kind of the first step. What are the current conditions? What are the issues? Where is water going? What space constraints do you have? Kind of thinking about these questions as you're considering your property holistically. One thing that I mentioned before was considering run-on from other properties. I didn't mark it here, and I'm not sure if this property had it, but that would be a good thing to note if there was additional run-on coming from other properties that might impact this site, because then you'd want to address the site differently in that case. I think that's all I have for this section here. Drawing it out. So then, based on those site conditions, you can think about, and I'll describe the solutions in a few slides, but I wanted to show a diagram of a site plan for what could actually be implemented at this site. So my colleague drew this site plan and just explain to the resident what opportunities there are for managing stormwater. Ideally, we want to infiltrate stormwater, like I mentioned, soak it into the ground. But if the area is not suitable, you'll want to think about ways to slow the water down, convey it to a stable location, and spread it out. Especially thinking about downstream locations and neighbors, like I mentioned, the more water that stays on site rather than sending it away, that will contribute to reducing flooding and downstream impacts. So for this site, the potential solutions are outlined in the circles, and they're pointing towards the sites on the property where some implementation or some change in practice could happen. So the circles are the downspout areas. I think if I'm pointing on this slide, you can see my cursor, I hope. The circles are downspouts, and so that's showing where water from gutters can be directed. The site marked 2 here, we thought a rain garden would be suitable for this site to manage water coming from that downspout. The third, number 3 here, could be another rain garden location, alternatively to the one behind the house, can be on the side of the house instead. And if a full rain garden isn't desired, that would be a great place to add vegetation, since that's where water from a downspout is being directed towards. So adding vegetation that is suitable for wet areas that can help with stabilizing the soil and soaking up stormwater. Number 4 was another location where she recommended adding vegetation in the front of the house where there's another downspout. And this property too, they're really looking to reduce the saturation that I mentioned along the longer side, along the south side of the property. The north arrows at the bottom here. So along the south side of the property, that's where they have the most saturation. So looking to move water away from that site into a site where it can be managed more appropriately. Another constraint was that this site is on a slope, is slightly sloped, and so water was leaving the house and going straight into leaving that downspout and going straight into the road. And so one solution could be adding a berm to slow the water down and have it infiltrate in front of the berm rather than just leaving the property and going down the driveway and the front walkway. This property they were also interested in removing the walkway itself, so that might be an option, actually removing impervious surface and just trying to create healthy soils in its location instead, and have water soak in right at the spot for a site where the impervious surface is no longer needed. So this could be hand-drawn, similar to the previous site. This previous slide here, this is kind of like the site conditions, what are the issues? And then the second option, or the second image here is the potential solutions that could be implemented based off of the constraints and stormwater issues that were identified during the site assessment. So luckily, there's a great the resource that I mentioned, the Vermont Guide to Stormwater Management, does walk you through some of these questions, and also has a decision tree too, that if you're looking at a certain type of runoff coming from a certain location, you can use that guide to help you decide what might be a good option. And so for the next few slides, I'll review what those options might be, with some pictures and examples of managing different types of runoff, and make some suggestions on these. So rooftop runoff. Some options here can be implementing rain barrels, especially if for smaller sections of rooftops and where you'd be able to reuse that water. Um, Rain barrels are great, but only if you're actually going to reuse the water and have an end goal for that. The collected water that you have. If it's just collecting there and sitting, it's not going to do very much and create more of a hassle. So before implementing a rain barrel, make sure that there's an end use for it. But there's lots of options to connect a rain barrel, have it drain towards a garden area, set up some irrigation. You could really go big on rain barrel installations, even a cistern for larger sections of roof and larger garden areas. I've seen those before. Um, so that is a potential option. However, if you don't want to maintain a rain garden, if you don't want to maintain a rain barrel and continue using that water, you might just want to encourage stormwater to infiltrate near where it's coming off a roof. So in the case of gutters where those are already installed, just making sure that the downspout has a safe location, a stable location to drain to vegetation. So the picture on the front disconnected a downspout. It just means that it's not draining to an impervious surface. It's draining to a stable, likely not super sloped location where it can be infiltrated appropriately into the ground or spread out around. There also are for sites where there's not gutters or gutters aren't suitable, doing a trench, which is a drip line trench in this picture here at the top, on the top right, is using gravel, which has space for water to flow through larger pore spaces than soil would. So it can hold more water and then hold water throughout the duration of a storm and allow it to slowly infiltrate into the surrounding soils. You just want to be careful of any foundation issues and consider the structure too that you're infiltrating this by. But we've seen plenty of great infiltration trenches, drip line trenches, and it can also be conveyed away by putting a pipe at the bottom and a perforated pipe too. So lots of options there. For driveways, there's various options depending on the type of driveway that you have. We can implement this picture at the bottom is a mix of ribbon strips and there's permeable pavers, so water is able to infiltrate on site. It's not a sealed surface. So that'd probably be like this one, and some other designs in similar vein would be like the gold star of driveway management, driveway runoff management, but it's not certainly not the only way to do best managed stormwater from a driveway. So really looking at driveways that are creating erosion or are eroding and then creating a sediment and maintenance issue is making sure that the driveway is properly stabilized, and then runoff from a driveway is draining to a stable location that's vegetated and can be spread out and infiltrated into the ground. For certain sites, installing an infiltration trench, which is a perpendicular trench, driveway trench, I guess we'd call it, to across the driveway, like capturing where the slope, capturing down the slope, water can flow into that grate and then be directed off the driveway so that you prevent a erosion issue. This can work in sites where water is flowing off the driveway and you want to get it to a safe, stable location and to prevent or further erosion too of the driveway. So there's both benefits: manage the stormwater and prevent excess erosion of the driveway. Another example here of ribbon strips, just decreasing the footprint of the driveway, only where the tire tracks are driving, and then having grass and also vegetation on the sides. So swales are a bit more about conveying, and that means moving stormwater or directing it to a certain location. So for sites where maybe soils are not as don't have as high infiltration rates, a swale using rocks and or stone, kind of this river stone here, a larger stone, and planted areas, guiding stormwater from a source, maybe from a rooftop, or a driveway, guiding it to a location where it can then be safely infiltrated, or it can infiltrate as it's going. So you're kind of creating like a dry riverbed is another way to describe it, or a fancier ditch, conveying it along a channel. And then infiltration can happen as it's being conveyed, and also slow the water down, direct it to a stable location. And this can be combined with other practices too, like a rain garden. There's lots of rooms for designing and creative solutions with swales. With lawns, there's ways to incorporate stormwater-friendly practices into managing lawns. One suggestion we have is to let your grass grow longer by raising the blade on the lawnmower, cutting it to a higher blade length, and this can allow the grass to develop stronger and more dense root systems that can help capture and store stormwater and offer some filtration benefits too. Grass itself won't manage all the stormwater, and especially in heavy rains, but a stronger root system of a grassed area will be better. Planting water-loving plants in areas where it's wet. I have a resource at the end with some suggestions of plants that can be used. Another option is to only mow sections of the lawn that you're using actively. If there's a large section of lawn that isn't being used and you're able to mow less or just not mow at all, mow where you go. That's an option to reduce maintenance of that site, and then also allow other more growth of vegetation in that area. And you could plant, or you could just as long as it's not full of invasive plants, but let that area kind of grow and let nature take over a little bit in certain areas that might be appropriate. Consider not using pesticides and fertilizer only if needed too. Some other suggestions for lawn management. Rain gardens. So these are depressions in the landscape that are designed to capture runoff from a certain area, using plants and soils to slow the stormwater, store it, and then infiltrate it into the ground. To get the full benefit, you want to capture stormwater falling from an impervious surface. So it's different than just planting plants in a certain area or planting a garden. You're actually directing stormwater from a site, from where it's created, to a rain garden. So in this design here, it's stormwater from a gutter is being directed into the rain garden. And some of the characteristics here, I'll just point out like I said, being conveyed from another impervious surface. Should be a minimum of 10 feet from structures to prevent impacts to the structure. There's the basin dug out area to store stormwater and let it infiltrate. Sometimes needing to add sandy soil depending on soil conditions, compost around plants to help the plants establish, especially at the beginning. Using a variety of native plants, creating good habitat, aesthetics, and plants that are well suited for our areas. There's an area for the water to pool, usually having some sort of surface cover, And then berming up the downhill side will help create that basin. And so all of these details are in the rain garden manual, but just wanted to call out a little bit about rain gardens. So dig into the rain garden manual for sure, or the previous workshop too. So as you can see, there's lots of options, probably overwhelming amount of different things that you can do on your property or encourage your neighbors to consider. Some inspiration that my colleague put together is this is a story map with images showing a property that is managing stormwater well, and they're doing it with in a site where it's poorly draining soils. So they don't really they have a lot of water issues, or they did before until they implemented these planting areas. So Nora, if you wouldn't mind putting that story map in the chat, that link there, but just some inspiration for some different planted options that might help with stormwater management and photos, and it describes kind of what each area and the different plants that were used. That's available on our website as well, too, the Sea Grant website. Another resource I mentioned earlier was this was kind of developed in relation with the previous slide, the story map, but we get a lot of questions about plants for stormwater management, and so my colleague Michelle put this together and with pictures showing some different native plants, and these are all well adapted and thrive or do well in areas with clay soils where that are saturated. So if that's something you're dealing with, you can look to this guide for some suggestions of plants, and a lot of them were in the previous the story map resource as well too. But this is available on our website too, and I might have linked this one, Nora. I'm not positive if I did or not, but they agree a few pages of resources or a few pages of this this table for different plant choices that might be considered. In addition to the rain garden manual too, there is a plant list in there. And this is a screenshot from one of the resources that I showed earlier, the Homeowner's Guide to Stormwater Management for small sites. So this outlines all of the practices. I talked about most of them today, but there's a few more, like green roofs I didn't talk about, but that's included here too. And so there's pages that describe each of the practices that I recommend, that I showed pictures of and discussed a little bit. And they tell you some more details on this in this table here. So for infiltration trenches, describing where they can be used, how much space is required, limitations, you might not want to use them in poorly draining soils, how to install them, and there's some more details on each page, and the time required, how much maintenance is involved, so higher maintenance, definitely the green roof here at the bottom in comparison to an infiltration trench, the cost, and some of the benefits that I've described too, slowing the water down and filtering it and infiltrating. And there's also another, earlier on in the manual, there's a decision tree that helps kind of outline, similar to the slides I showed, rooftop options for rooftop runoff management and driveways and so on. So lots of resources in here, and hopefully I shared kind of a broad overview, but for more detail, I'd definitely refer to that resource. It's put together nice, aesthetically pleasing, and lots of good information. And here, I have them both linked as a QR code here, and I gave Nora the links for both resources. And a slide, my final slide has a whole bunch of other, I feel like this is an overview of resources, but a whole bunch of other links to other groups and programs, and both of those tools, the manual, and the homeowner's guide that could be of interest and use to folks interested in helping to reduce pollution and keeping our waterways clean. So I appreciate your attendance tonight, and I'd be happy to talk about and answer questions. At this point, I need to get back to the Zoom screen here. There we go. But that is, yeah, that's what I have tonight.
Thank you, Jill. That was really great. I think I've linked all of the resources that you mentioned in the
Oh,
chat,
great.
so
Thank
those
you.
should all be available for everyone to check out. I don't see any questions in the chat. Does anyone feel free to raise your hand or oh, I see one question from Dean. Do you have a favorite residential stormwater practice? And if so, which one and why?
Thanks, Dean. I think my favorites are rain gardens and specifically bioretention, which is just you know, a larger scale rain garden that can treat um, runoff from a larger land area, and there's typically more elements to it, but I think I like the elements of including plants and different soil media mixes, amendments, and um, being able to treat water close to where it's produced. So yeah, I think rain gardens, bioretention are my favorite kind of practice. They yeah seem to just make a lot of sense too for managing stormwater on close to on site.
We have one more question from Beverly. When allowing for grasses to grow, would you worry about ticks?
Yeah, we got this question at a workshop I hosted, and my colleague gave an answer, which I'll repeat, is that yes, that is could be a concern, and you might want to um, make that consideration when deciding areas for where you recreate versus where you'll leave allowed to grow. Um, and then some interesting tidbits that she mentioned was that there is still ticks are still found in lawn areas too, and there's been some work showing that even lawns and areas kind of along the edges still have a similar um, number of ticks, but although along edges and forested areas is kind of where you'd see them more. So maybe that, giving a buffer along an edge, um, interacting and yes, I guess there still are ticks even in lawn mown areas, but something to yeah consider and look out for, especially as we're seeing a longer tick season these days and more of them, fortunately.
Great, thank you. Um, I'm just gonna send a link to where we will be posting the recording of this webinar. Feel free to share that, send it out, and a link to a survey that I'd really appreciate if everyone could fill out just to tell me about your experience. Um, Looks like I have one more question from Josh, who's asking, where can I find a recommendation for a depth for a water bar constructed in my driveway? How many and how far between?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it definitely depends on slope, um, and considering where the water can safely be directed to. I can send you some design guidance we have for the Blue Stormwater program, too, that has some specific information on oh, sounds good. Send this to you, Ken, on specifically on installing water bars. I don't know if they are in the specifically called out in the homeowner's guide. Oh, thanks, Bridget, for sharing the tick piece too. That's great. Another resource on
Kent, would you like to ask a question? Looks like you're still muted. Okay.
Okay, feel free to send me an email too.
Yeah. And
With
all of those links to this stormwater guide and everything should be in the chat, so it's a good place to start.
oh, there's two Joshes I didn't see.
Yeah. One Josh is
Two
actually
Joshes on the
Kent.
screen.
Um, I have a question actually. I'm curious what methods you found are most popular with the blue BTV. Like what are people most excited to install?
We've had a number of infiltration trench installations, um, and I like rain gardens too. A lot of people do get really excited about rain gardens. And we're hoping that some will be installed DIY this summer too. But there's definitely a lot of excitement for rain gardens because they're kind of the classic stormwater management option that you can think of. So initially people think rain gardens, but then when we go to their site, might realize that there might be another option as well. So yeah, infiltration trenches have been pretty common to kind of getting water away from areas where it's not desired and into a more stable location.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have one more question from Mike, who's asking, is there a chance that a rain garden could become a wetland and then have buffer restrictions?
Interesting. Well, you typically would a rain garden you'd want to have soils that are sandy, and you might have wetland plants growing in that sandy soil area because you want to have plants that can withstand like inundation and higher water levels. So I don't know if I can think of a case where it would have restrictions like that if it's kind of becomes a wetland, but um, typically like a fully designed rain garden would have more sandy soils, which would indicate like in good infiltration, but a wetland you typically have hydric soils, which are, you know, saturated, mostly clay soils where there isn't good infiltration, water sits. So it would probably be in the wrong location if you're putting a rain garden in a in an area where it's where the soils are already really saturated. Wouldn't want to send more water there. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you.
But if we don't have any more questions, maybe we'll wrap things up. So thank you again, Jill, for this presentation. It's really great. Um,
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening and
yeah,
attending.
and
I
thanks
hope you
everyone for
all
coming.
enjoy the sun. There's still sun out, so get outside, enjoy the night. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.